The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, everyone, welcome to this Work From Home Wednesday presentation on what we have so far in terms of COVID-19 debt relief legislation and where we are heading in terms of debt relief legislation and policy. I'm going to add this excerpt for policy because we're also going to talk today a little bit about what forms of federal relief are occurring on more of an agency by agency basis. So my name is Ken. I am a West Coast-based reference attorney, fairly new to the Fast Case family, who really pushed for these various sessions to basically, in ideally 30 minutes or less, teach you about a current event or a legal skill that can be useful, not necessarily even on a fast case product or research tool basis, but just a legal skill to learn, because I love knowledge and I love putting together presentations, frankly. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. I will also note that because it is something that people regularly ask, this is an information session. It is not going to be eligible for CLE credit. It's designed to just inform and hopefully entertain a little. And for those who might know someone who is interested in viewing this presentation later, I will also be providing a recording of the presentation later basis. Can everyone still hear me okay? I think I just had a disruption on my audio. Anyway, with that being out of the way, let's dive right in. So no CLE credits. We're learning about debt relief policy. Sorry about the brief qualm there. Technology is sometimes fun like that. All right, moving forward. Let's talk about debt relief that is already in place. So what we're going to be covering on the next few slides is going to be talking about programs and relief policies that you can have access to immediately. So the first is the one that is most talked about. That is going to be our direct payments via a stimulus check. Now, our stimulus checks are going to be pretty basic. You're eligible to receive a cash payment of $1,200 per person with an additional payment of $500 per dependent. Now, a dependent can be the age of 24 or lower. Now, there is a caveat. If you choose to receive credit for, so let's say, for example, you have a 19-year-old child who is a college student, you claim that child as a dependent on your, for the purpose of the stimulus check, you claim them as such on your 2019 or 2018 taxes. In the event that you have not filed your 2019 taxes yet, because that deadline has been extended, you will exclude that dependent from being able to receive their own $1,200 check. So just keep that caveat in mind when you're dealing with claimed dependents between the age of 18 and 24. There is an income cap, so it is going to be $75,000 per person. And then, of course, there is a reduction of, for the $1,200 amount, $5 per $100 in income above $75,000. So keep that formula in mind. Now, I will be sending out this presentation along with a recording of this webinar. And you're going to be able to click on the pictures, because who doesn't like a hidden hyperlink? And I have two pictures for you. The status portal is now open. I encourage you to wait a day or two before trying to check the status of your stimulus check, because right now the server is about to crash. It's what I'm hearing from my conversation with a person at the IRS, because there are legitimately millions of people trying to access it as it just launched. And then I'm also placing a link to the economic payment, or the stimulus check payment information center, where you can just access things like the IRS frequently asked questions, et cetera, et cetera. And I will also say, as a general scheduling, they have released the first 5 million checks. They're doing them right now based upon order of income. So individuals that receive their income because from something like Social Security, or they make $20,000 or less, they will receive their checks first, and then they just tier up accordingly by ranges of about $10,000 in income. This does mean that if you are at the higher end of that income, you will likely receive that stimulus check sometime in late May or early June. The other final caveat to make a note of is that you do not have to have income in order to receive a stimulus check. Previously, there were rumors that if you were not a person who made enough income in order to qualify to file a tax return, that you would not receive a stimulus check. This is not correct. If you go to the status portal for your stimulus check, the image on the right-hand side of this slide, you will see a button below that allows you to input your direct deposit information in the event that you need to either update it because it has changed since the information provided on your last filed tax return, or if you're one of those individuals who did not have to file a tax return in 2018 or 2019, such as a person who does not have enough income to make them eligible to need to file a tax return. Retirement plan. So one area that is not often talked about in terms of relief is the ability to take out loans from your retirement plan. Now, most of us say, okay, well, that is a poor financial thing for you to say, Ken, because why on earth do I want to take out a loan from my retirement account because of those pesky penalties? So what they did with the last debt relief bill is they have waived the penalty. Now, all you have to show is that you have suffered some sort of adverse financial consequence as a result of COVID-19. Now, on your screen here, initially, the standard was you have to suffer financial consequences as a result of you yourself contracting COVID-19. That is not the standard any longer. That was the standard for about 12 hours. Now they have added or related factors. Or related factors has been interpreted to mean things like if you have a relative, a person in your household who you are, or not in your household, who you are caring for, and as a result of that, you are experiencing a reduction in your ability to make money, or you are experiencing a lofty increase in your financial expenses. Things of that nature now fall under this sort of additional caveat of or related factors. Now, last week we did a bigger presentation on student loans. I'm also going to include a link to that presentation from last Wednesday if you did not attend and you are interested. We talked about the big relief for student loans, for federal student loans specifically. There is currently in place an administrative forbearance through September 30th, meaning if you have a federal student loan, you do not make a payment on your federal student loans until October 30th of 2020. Now, a couple of caveats to note about this is typically when you receive a forbearance, what happens is all of the interest builds on your federal student loans, and then it is added or it's capitalized, or a fancy way of saying it is added to your principal, and then you start paying interest on that new sort of combined balance. That is an exception for this forbearance granted by the CARES Act. This forbearance period does not result in the accrual of interest. It's really important to know because, as we know from capitalization, this can make loan payments balloon very quickly. Another caveat about the administrative forbearance, the big caveat is it does count toward your income-driven or income-based repayment plan loan cancellation. If you are not in an income-based or income-driven payment plan, you should consider them. That is a payment plan where after a set period of time, you have your federal loans canceled. That is distinct from forgiven, meaning you will pay a tax bill on the canceled amount at the end of the period. However, those cancellation aspects are in, or opportunities are in place. Now, we also have various forgiveness programs. The one most relevant to attorneys or legal types in general is going to be public service loan forgiveness. Now, for public service loan forgiveness, the entire 7-month period for which the federal student loans are being placed in this administrative forbearance does count as if you made a payment. So for loan cancellation and for public service loan forgiveness, or for any kind of federally granted loan forgiveness, you will get 7 months of credit toward either loan cancellation or loan forgiveness. Now, if you are a person who is currently enrolled in a legal program, if you are a student in law school, for example, you should contact your financial aid office, because in the CARES Act does give the financial aid office at each individual institution the ability to cancel your federal loans for that interrupted semester. So this current semester, where many law schools closed early due to COVID-related issues, in most cases, you are eligible to have the loans you took out for this semester canceled. Now, another thing to note that is not related to your financial aid office at your respected institutions is that the loans you took out for an interrupted semester as a result of COVID-19 related issues does not, and I repeat, does not count toward the cap placed upon your ability to borrow federal loans. If you were like myself, while you were in school, you oftentimes dealt with issues around approaching that cap on things like, for example, our Stafford loans specifically. You know, this can be a concern because Stafford loans, for example, tend to have better interest rates. So just keep that in mind. The last thing I will say is if you are a person who has taken out a Parent Plus loan on behalf of another, you are also eligible for this administrative forbearance period. Within the other recording and PowerPoint slides that I will send out for the presentation from last week, I will also provide you with a list of private financial institutions for private student loans that have confirmed, based upon my previous conversations, that they are also providing some version of loan forbearance or deferral ranging from 30 days to 6 months during this COVID-19 period. Now, the other big relief we have for our student loans is going to be the one that is talked about surprisingly not at all, which is that the most recent Debt Relief Act does give an employer the ability to provide their employees with private or federal student loans with up to $5,250 in direct compensation to contribute to their student loans. Now, the thing for that the CARES Act did specifically is it allows the employer to deduct that amount. It also does not make that amount taxable for the employee. Another caveat is if you are a small business who is currently participating in one of the SBA programs provided by Debt Relief Acts, you can use funds from an SBA 7 loan generally, or from the Paycheck Protection Program to provide that $5,000 or up to $5,250 in funds for loan assistance for your employees. Now, relief for small businesses. Now, the biggest form of relief we have for small businesses is going to be through the loan programs offered by the SBA. The biggest one is going to be our Paycheck Protection Program. If you follow the news at all, there's currently lots of discussions around, is the Paycheck Protection Program working? Now, I will tell you for the most part, the answer is yes. The issues that we are running into actually have to do with issues behind the scenes. So for example, let's talk about Wells Fargo. If you are a financial institution that has ever had a limit placed upon the amount of loans you can provide due to settlement agreements with things like the Federal Reserve Bank, you are limited in how many loans you can provide via the Paycheck Protection Program. This is because, unlike a lot of SBA loan programs, loans from the Paycheck Protection Program are provided by independent SBA certified lenders. So just keep that in mind. You're not borrowing that money directly from the SBA. They are not administering that loan program. What they are doing is they have a list of approved lenders. So what people are running into is if they think that their loans are being capped, for example, that is oftentimes not a result of the program running out of money. That is often a result of the financial institution itself having to really allocate how much funds per applicant they can provide due to overall institution caps being placed upon that specific financial institution. As a result, I am encouraging people who are running into issues around this to consult another financial institution with regards to applying for your Paycheck Protection Program loan. Now, the Paycheck Protection Program loans currently have a 2-year term at a 1% interest rate. A lot of people say, okay, well, I thought it was going to be up to 10 years at 0.5%. The reason it is at 2 years at 1% is because that standard was flexible, and they are doing this kind of short payback period in hopes of incentivizing people to conform to the program. As long as you promise to use the amount for retaining your staff and for things like rent, mortgage, and utilities, the entire loan balance is forgivable. What they do not want to do with this program is incentivize businesses to go out and use it to do things like expand your business and not simply do things like retention. So I believe the current standard is that you cannot experience a full-time staffer making $100,000 or less cannot experience more than a 25% reduction in their pay during the covered period by a PPP loan. And I believe that you also have to show that you are not, you've not experienced more than a 10% reduction in your full-time staff as a whole. So just keep those standards in mind. Another thing to remember is that with the PPP program, the period is generally going to be calculated based upon somewhere around 2.5 months of payroll expenses. Now, the other additional program that is in place is going to be your economic injury disaster loans, which are provided directly by the SBA. Those are they're called a loan advance. They are essentially a forgivable $10,000 amount that a small business can use in order to sort of get an additional little chunk of money in the event that their small business is experiencing a temporary loss of revenue. So make sure you check out that program as well. Now, the SBA is also providing an additional array of materials to be found at their website. In terms of other loan programs, I am not highlighting those because those programs are sort of independently provided by the agency and are oftentimes not forgivable. I'm really highlighting these because as long as you follow the terms, the full amounts will be forgivable. Now, there have been some questions around whether 75% of the PPP program proceeds are forgivable or 100% of the PPP proceeds are forgivable, because there have been questions around what about the percent I borrow for things like my mortgage, my rent, or my utilities. I will say in most cases, it's going to be 100%. However, we haven't really seen the subscription and what that is going to look like as a whole. We also haven't seen, as we'll talk about in a moment, how much more funding we're going to get from the PPP program due to the fourth debt relief bill. All right, tax credits. Employers that are eligible for the PPP program are in also available for a refundable payroll tax credit on 50% of wages paid out of up to $10,000. I put the basic details of the tax credit on your screen, so you should consult that as an option as well. People don't talk about the tax credit, but we're going to talk about it now because it is essentially a great way. Now, the nice thing about the tax credit is there is a provision in the CARES Act that may allow you to actually not have to front the other, your actual employer taxes. So that could be another incentive to participate in these various types of credits. So in other words, not having to pay out your employer portion of your payroll taxes and also having a refundable credit combined can allow the IRS to provide you with some nice relief. Now, we do also have an expansion of our unemployment insurance. I have also placed the basic details of this. The Pandemic Unemployment Assistance provision of our CARES Act was designed to really, number one, extend unemployment insurance being provided by your respective states, but also to provide financial relief for individuals typically not eligible to receive unemployment via their state. So it could be things like if you are a 3L law student and you've recently graduated and you've had a job lined up, you could not get to that job right away due to COVID-related issues. You're eligible to receive, in many cases, or hopefully in all cases, some form of unemployment during this period based upon the federal sort of influx of funds provided to all 50 states by the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. Now, in order to receive funds from unemployment funds from the PUA program, you will still apply for unemployment via your respective state offices. Now, another provision of the CARES Act is designed to also expand the amount you could receive via your respective state unemployment insurance calculations. So in a number of ideal cases through July 31st of this year, you should be able to receive the normal amount for which you are eligible based upon your state calculations, plus an extra $600 per week. And as far as I know, if you have applied for unemployment issues already and you are currently experiencing issues, it may be because they have not released the full amount of the funds for the PUA provision of the CARES Act. The large amount of that federal influx is coming out on April the 24th, I believe. So that may be why people are saying, okay, well, I'm only receiving this amount. I thought I could receive this amount. So that $600 per week additional amount you would be otherwise eligible for is likely due to your state has yet to receive that amount of federal money that is coming to them to provide the PUA expansion, because every bit of the PUA expansion is designed to come from federal dollars. Now, sick leave provisions. Now, before the CARES Act, we had the FCRA, which is the Families First Corona Response Act, and that essentially focused on our sick leave expansion. The basic details of that are provided on the screen before you. The exception to point out with our sick leave provisions is that there is an exemption for employers that have less than 50 employees, for which providing the expansion of their sick leave provisions as dictated by the FCRA would result in the business being able to stay open. Because remember, the point of all of these debt relief acts is to retain our businesses and retain our employment and retain things in general. Retention is the crux of these relief bills. Now, there was an additional influx of funds being designed to help make these expanded sick leave provisions possible for small businesses. So for example, if you were a business for which the FCRA applied and you fell into this exception of saying, okay, well, I don't think that I can afford to participate in this program because of the various reasons, it's going to put my business in jeopardy, you can now use proceeds from the PPP program in order to make the paid sick leave expansions a possibility. So just keep that in mind. Now, relief for the homestead, looking at things around issues of rent protections and mortgage protections. I have this image here, just a little levity. You do not need to move to the desert to escape rent or mortgages, because we have the following. So first up, we have this beautiful map that has been provided by an organization known as Tenants Together. I have turned this image into a hyperlink for you. If we use my own home state or my current home state as an example, you see that if you click on a portion of the map, it's going to tell you exactly what type of tenant and eviction and rent protections are in place for your respective jurisdictions. If a state is in green, it has already passed some version of protections for tenants. If a state is in red, those things are currently pending. There will be a view more info at the bottom of each of the boxes that open, allowing you to expand upon the details around the protections for tenants and protections from eviction and protections for rent in general. Clicking my slides away here, and that is okay. Bear with me just one moment because I'm moving off the screen because I clicked too quick. All right. No worries. We are gonna keep moving forwards. This technology hates me today. All right. So now we're going to talk about mortgage protections. So our mortgage protections are going to be designed for FHFA loans specifically. So we have separate provisions for our FHFA loans, which is going to be a foreclosure moratorium and the ability to receive up to 180 days of forbearance for all loans that are federally insured. Now, if you have a mortgage that is not insured by a federal loan provider, I have contacted a number of the private lenders to get them to lay out the provisions for which they are providing any form of loan deferment or loan forbearance for their respective home loans, mortgages, et cetera, et cetera. I also have a separate slide here for you laying out some additional institutions. All right, so with all of that being out of the way, let's talk about where we're going to go from here. There's a lot of talk in the news today about we've had 3 debt relief bills passed already. Is there going to be a 4th? So the best answer is maybe. So here's what we know so far. We know that there's a couple of things that are going to be talked about or that want to be put through in this 4th debt relief bill. Now, number one, as far as timing, nothing is going to happen until the 4th week of April or the 1st week of May at the earliest. Now, when I say nothing is going to happen, I mean that is the earliest for which we are likely going to receive a text of any sort of 4th debt relief bill whatsoever. I did have the great opportunity to talk to people from both the office of Pelosi and the office of McConnell, who have confirmed that for me, that they do not expect any of the text to come out until that period. Now, some of the things that we know are, we know that there's going to be potentially the HEROES Fund. So there was a proposal released for the HEROES Fund that is designed to provide some sort of pay increase for frontline workers, as well as a recruitment amount for individuals who work within health and home care. I will discuss the proposals around that in a moment. The other big thing we are going to have is we are going to, just as a side note for anyone on the webinar, if you are currently experiencing issues whatsoever, do not fret. I am recording this session and we will have you a full version of that later. I'm also providing you with these slides. So even if you need to watch this at a later date, do not fret, I will have it available for you. Even with the inclusion of my flubs around being able to move from slide to slide, as you saw just a moment ago. We also know that a big portion of this presentation is going, or this presentation, A big portion of our fourth debt relief bill is also going to be focused on expanding funds for the PPP program. So one of the almost guaranteed inclusions within our fourth debt relief bill is going to be a $250 billion expansion for our PPP program. There's also potentially going to be a lessening of the caps that are placed upon the lending capabilities, as we talked about earlier, for specific financial institutions in terms of how or what amount of loans they're allowed to provide to applicants under the PPP program. So they may provide some form of exception for those institutions. I'll also point out that as of present, a majority, unfortunately, it seems, in both chambers are concerned about at least the immediate passage of our fourth debt relief bill because of the fact that, as I was noting before, April 24th is when we really have that kind of final date for the full release of federal funds from the CARES Act being provided in order to make all of the programs that they implemented via that act put into place. So they're sort of saying, okay, well, let's release these funds first, see how they're working, and then after that date, discuss a fourth bill. We will see how it goes in the land of politics. As I was telling you earlier, I have laid out for you on the screen just the full policies around the potential HEROES Fund. Now, with the HEROES Fund, we do have a firm proposal in place. As I mentioned earlier, the HEROES Fund is designed to do two things. It's designed to provide a salary or hourly rate pay increase for individuals who are working in front-facing positions, so people such as your healthcare workers, people in grocery stores, and things of that nature. It's also designed to specifically for healthcare workers and first responders to provide those individuals with up to a $15,000 incentive. So an example of that would be if you were in New York, for example, and they were wanting to incentivize healthcare workers to come to that state to provide medical assistance for COVID-19 related issues within that state, the fourth debt relief bill or the HEROES Fund would provide a respective state with a block of money in order to provide that incentive. I've also laid out for you some of the other fine print associated with this program, including issues around death benefits. And then, of course, as anyone knows from talking to me at all, I am all about legislative intent. So I've also provided with you a little bit of the background or commentary for which the members of Congress who push through this proposal are using as the sort of precedential basis for establishing such a fund in a fourth debt relief bill. All right. So as I was telling you before, there is currently no guarantee that we're going to have a fourth debt relief bill at all. However, we do presently have some form of federal relief available for us in a non-legislative capacity. So to talk a little bit about that is going to be our head librarian, Erin Page, who is going to talk about the loan program from the Federal Reserve. So Erin, take it away.
Thanks so much, Ken. I just wanted to say thank you everyone for attending, and let's get started talking about this non-legislative opportunity. So everyone, of course, is at least a little bit familiar with the Federal Reserve. They have separate authority within their scope to issue relief packages for items within their scope. And I know that sounds very redundant, but that's pretty much how it's phrased, actually. So this is most well known, of course, for the economic stimulus packages and the easing, the quantitative easing that has been applied to the market in previous recessions. In fact, there's actually a current plan. They're not calling it quantitative easing anymore. It has a much longer, much fluffier name. In fact, let me go ahead and read it to you because honestly, it's very long and wordy. Their current plan is called a plan to provide and enhance the liquidity and flow of funds in the economic sphere via the addition of quantitative funding. So that's a nice wordy way of putting that particular fund or that particular action. But there are a number of other goals, and the most specific one that we're talking about today is the Main Street New Loan Facility. So this is the act that just came into play last week on the 9th, as you can see on the slide. And this was authorized under the Federal Reserve Act with the intent of facilitating lending. So this is not a stimulus payment. This is an actual loan. So it does have some rather strict guidelines, both for the lending portion, eligibility-wise, as well as guidelines for the repayment schedule. But it is a source of funding that is completely independent of the legislative acts that we've talked about thus far in today's program. Speaking of who the lenders are going to be, these are going to be U.S. insured depository institutions. So if they have that FDIC logo following their institutional information, those would be the entities that are capable of doing this. And this does include the savings and loan holding companies, some of which are not eligible under the current legislative programs. Borrowers for this particular program, as the slide says, are up to 10,000 employees or $2.5 billion in annual revenue, as according to the 2019 tax returns or tax information. And yes, just like with the legislative program, not all of those returns or that information is in fact complete. That is one of the things that they are holding out on, though, for the Federal Reserve Program. If you are not eligible, you have to complete the information to become eligible. So again, it's a little bit more incentive to finish reporting the information so that you can become eligible. In addition to this eligibility, in addition to the size of the employer that is involved, they have a couple of restrictions on other eligibilities, which we'll talk about in just a second. But the terms of the loan include that it's going to be a 4-year maturity, so long enough to get past the current crisis, hopefully, but not long enough to put it into the scope of a mortgage or other long-term note. So it's not, or it may not be subject to some of the legislation that is in regards to those longer term notes. That is a concept or a talk for a completely different day. I'm not going to go into huge details on that. But the amortization of the principal and interest is deferred for 1 year. So it's essentially an interest-free loan for the first year. And then for the remaining years, it does accrue interest until that due date in 4 years. There is a minimum loan size of $1 million. And then a maximum loan size that's lesser of $25 million, or, and then there's a really long complicated phrase here, but essentially 4 times the EBITDA of that particular lender, or excuse me, particular company. Prepayment is permitted without penalty. So this is a loan where if and when the economy strengthens, very easy to pay off, and especially if the economy strengthens in a rapid manner after our current circumstances, it's possible that the loan could be repaid within that 1-year interest-free period. And there's a requirement regarding who remains eligible for the loan. The incentive for the lending institution is that they do receive 5% of the eligible loan, and there's a shared risk on that. Next slide, Ken, if you don't mind. All right. So we were talking a moment ago about the additional restrictions or the additional requirements regarding these loans. They must not use the proceeds for the loan to pay off other less favorable loans. I cannot emphasize this requirement enough. There's a lot of language regarding this. They cannot use it to pay off loans that have equal or lower priority. There is an exception for mandatory principal payments. So various types of balloon loans that have a mandatory principal payment could be eligible for this. But again, the eligible loan, this particular loan from the reserve, has to be paid first. It also requires that they not cancel other lines of business or other credit lines with the lending institution. So if you currently have a line of credit with your bank, you cannot cancel that line of credit in favor of this interest-free loan. Reasonable. Also, you have to make certain attestations that this loan is necessary due to the current circumstances and that it's going to be used for specific purposes, namely payroll and retention of employees and costs associated with that. There's also restrictions. These loans proceeds cannot be used for stock buybacks or compensation of various types of incentive compensation, or various types of gifts or other loyalty payments. This is growing out of the financial circumstances that happened during the recent recession. There was a lot of controversy regarding how the various bailout loans were used, and the restrictions that are on this Federal Reserve loan are similar to the restrictions that came out of that particular event. Finally, there are restrictions that are related to the CARES Act. So some of the restrictions that Ken mentioned earlier in today's presentation, these same restrictions do apply to the Federal Reserve Loan Program as well. So it's not, if you have a circumstance that doesn't meet the CARES requirements, odds are you will not be able to use the funds from the Federal Reserve Main Street program either. Alrighty. And just as a reminder, this is already in existence. This came out last week, and the Federal Reserve does have the possibility of acting in a sooner manner than a fourth bill from our legislature. So there could be further loan programs and other types of easing or other types of monetary programs coming from the Federal Reserve. So do keep an eye on the Federal Reserve. There'll be a link to this Main Street program as well as to the COVID page on the Federal Reserve's webpage, so you can see some of the other actions they've taken in response to this crisis. But do keep an eye out for further updates from the Federal Reserve. There are a couple of ideas that are currently being discussed by them that I think will be very interesting. Again, they're still speculative at this moment because they have not released the full details, but I do recommend, if you are looking for other types of easing for either your clients or your own business, that you keep an eye on that as well, because there are different restrictions and there's a different likelihood that they'll be able to act sooner than Congress will.
All right. Thank you, Erin.
My pleasure.
Okay. So that is all we have. A few reminders: if you experience any technical issues, and when I say technical issues, I do not mean my inability to transition between slides or use a Bluetooth headset, do not fret, because I will provide you with a clean recording of this session within 48 hours after now. A couple of other reminders: pay attention to changes in the last week of April or the first week of May with regards to the fourth debt relief bill. I would also encourage individuals on the line to pay attention to the SBA specifically, because they are currently exploring an expansion, as I mentioned earlier, around their 7A loans. So those are potentially underway to provide another opportunity for a business with 500 employees or less to receive another line of affordable debt. Now, I should also make a side note that I did not mention earlier. The Paycheck Protection Program is eligible for workers of all kinds. You do not have to be an employee. You can also take out those funds for independent contractors who regularly provide services for your small business, assuming you can provide evidence of the amount of funds necessary or the amount of money for which you have paid out for those regular services over an annual basis. So for things like our contractors, you do not have to show evidence of every single month payroll output, just a regular service being provided by said contractor over a calendar year. If you have further questions, feel free to email me directly at kstrickland@fastcase.com.
And yes,
otherwise,
a couple of the questions that were issued during the presentation, and we will be following up on those as well.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. I know we're several minutes over. You have been lovely and patient, and I hope to see you all next Wednesday. Have a lovely rest of your week.